folks, and welcome to the Daily Coin. I'm your host, Rory, and I'm joined again today by my very knowledgeable and talented co-host, Mr. Mark S. Mann. How you doing, Mark?
Hey, Rory.
And this week on the Weekly Metal Update, we're going to get into home training, and Mark has put together a really great show for us today, and we're just going to dive right in. And Mark, take it away.
Okay. One of the things that I hear a lot of people talking about is um, going to seek some type of advanced training, or people that are at the novice level of firearms that they want to go out and get some type of uh, higher end training to take them beyond the gun safety aspect of what they're doing and teach them how to fight with a gun. And I think that's what people need to understand. And a lot of times, people get kind of lured into this false sense of skill because they can go to the range and hang a target in a controlled environment that's well lit at a known distance and shoot a nice tight little group, and they walk away from that saying, "Wow, I'm a badass. I know how to shoot." It's like, okay, well, that's great. You're learning some basic marksmanship skills, but that's really not fighting with a gun. And we all know that paper doesn't fire back.
Not ever.
In the real world, your target is not going to sit there as a static threat and say, hey, Mr. Homeowner, or hey, Mr. Good Guy, I'm going to sit here nice and still, at a perfectly flat angle for you so you can shoot holes in me. That's not how it's going to work. Okay?
No, it doesn't.
Yeah. So I think, one thing that people really need to realize is that there's a difference between target shooting and there's a difference between gunfighting. And that's something that not a lot of people understand. And the people that do understand that, they're the ones that are going out there and seeking training from professionals. Okay. Bottom line is, Rory, you can never have too much training. You can never do too much practice, because the reality is that shooting, gunfighting, it's a perishable skill. It's not like riding a bike where you can go shoot thousands of rounds a year and do that for several years and then take a couple of years off from doing it and expect to get back on the bike and have the same level of skill and competency that you did. It's not. The reality is it's not that way.
What you're talking about close quarters combat training. Is that right?
Yes, and okay. It may be beyond. That would be more pistol and close, like you said, close quarter stuff. Usually for civilians is relegated towards pistol and revolver training. But there's people that do a lot of their training for CQB with long guns, shotguns, rifles, stuff like that, carbine type firearms, and that's the one thing I do want to caution people when they do go out and get training. And there's a lot of people out there that long gun training to them is at the same distance of pistol engagements. And hey, I'd rather be holding a long gun any day, but than a handgun. But the truth is, if you're going to go out there and you're going to make a pile of once fired brass at 25 yards with an AR-15 at 50 cents a round, there's probably a lot of things that you can do that are more effective and more cost effective and more practical without having to go out there and do all that stuff. Okay. So, what I think people need to understand, because, we realize that there's all different types of skill levels, so I realize that we have a wide audience, and if you are already a ninja, this is not the week that you're going to be real excited about the subject matter. But the thing that people need to understand is that if you're just learning the basics of gun safety, you really need to do that before you can go out with an instructor and seek hands-on training on how to fight with a gun. The bottom line is that you have to be able to safely handle a gun before you can do any type of learning to move and shoot and fight with the gun. Okay.
So as far as what do you mean by safely handling a gun? Explain that a
Oh,
little bit.
the first thing people need to do is they need to understand that, where this is not something that's forgiving. So, the first thing I always tell people is keep your finger off the trigger. Don't shoot yourself. Don't shoot any of the other students, and most importantly, don't shoot me. So okay, but seriously though, people need to get proficient with their gun. When you go to the range, that is not the time to be learning on how to fumble with your firearm. You should have a complete mastery of your gun, of your firearm, your weapon. That includes how the gun functions, loading, unloading, how to make the gun safe, how to show the instructor that the gun is open and empty. You should be able to basically handle the gun and the manual of arms. You should know the manual of arms for the gun, meaning safe loading and unloading and proper holster and reholstering. Okay, so you to be able to safely and effectively carry and use a weapon, you have to be able to have some type of retention, meaning you can't take the gun and stick it in your waistband and run around and draw the gun and be able to move and fight with the gun. You need a holster, and you need a quality holster. All holsters are not created the same, and I recommend something that's on the belt line, whether you're right or left-handed. You should have something that's either in the pants or out of the pants or on the belt, anywhere between your hip to your appendix, let's say. Okay. So a quality holster is a must. Also, some type of magazine pouch to be able to carry at least 2 other magazines is important, because having ammo is important when you're training. You can't go back to the you can't get off the firing line every time to reload your magazine every time. So you need at least a minimum of 3 magazines to be able to go and seek some training. So number one, you need to know safe gun handling. Know your weapon, know how to use your weapon, know how your weapon functions.
Now, would you include dismantling or taking apart of the weapon as well as cleaning it, keeping it clean?
I would say so. Yep, because if you have a problem with that, you're going to need to be able to address that in the field. So,
right.
If you can't take care of your own firearm, you shouldn't expect anyone else to do it for you. So it's being able to field strip the gun and being able to clean it, as well as identify any minor issues that you may have with properly assembling it are necessary. Okay, and the second thing that people need to focus on is drawing and presentation. The reason why I say this is because you can't do that at most ranges and gun clubs. Most shooting ranges, most public ranges, all have very strict rules that you're not allowed to draw a loaded gun from the holster on the range. So the question ends up becoming, the typical, hey, if no one will hire me because I don't have any experience, how am I supposed to get experience? Well, it's the same thing with drawing a gun. You have to be able to realize that you being able to draw the gun safely is an issue. You can't not have an accidental discharge when you're holstering, drawing or reholstering the firearm. So having being able to get some practice doing that at home with an empty gun is very important. And for people that don't want to do that with their live firearm, you can also go out and get a training gun that's a plastic gun. For just about every prolific handgun out there, regardless of what you have, whether it's a revolver, you can get a molded plastic dummy gun that will fit in the holster that will allow you to do everything except have a trigger pull. They even have sights that are pretty darn close to what the real guns have on them. So those are only $30 to $40. And those are really good for when you're playing scenarios where you don't want to bring a real gun into play, because you don't want to be pointing a real gun at somebody, or you may want to use that in an environment where you're not allowed to even have a real weapon in the training environment. So those things are really great for people that are serious about training. So you're going to need some practice at handling your firearm and learning the ins and outs of your firearm and learning how your firearm works. Again, being able to safely draw your gun, have the right grip, have consistency to draw, have consistency in presentation of the firearm. Those are all very important things. And another thing, dry firing, dry practice. Pros do this a lot. Anybody that's a serious marksman, anybody that is an instructor, anybody that's a high-end shooter, they're all doing a lot of dry fire practice. Nothing is a substitute for the real thing. But if you dry practice, if you do a lot of dry firing and you do it consistently, you will notice that that's a game changer for you. It's going to make the most of your ammo on the range. Most people can't go out and shoot every day live fire because of cost, because of logistics, because of ammo scarcity, because they don't have a place to do it. There's all different reasons why people can't shoot every day. But most people can dry practice very often. And what I recommend for people to do is the next time they go to the range, get an extra target or two. Don't shoot it. Bring it back home and hang it up in your garage or a place in your house where it's not going to upset anyone, where you could take it up and put it down. So when you decide you want to dry practice, you can move to the distance that you want and hang the target in your house or your garage or wherever you are, your basement, and you can get practice at going through a draw and presentation, proper sight alignment, and proper trigger press, and reholster the gun and do that. And do that over and over. Spend 15, 20, 30 minutes when you have time to be able to do that. And you will be amazed at how well your proficiency goes up, how much better groups you shoot, how much smoother your draw and presentation is, how much more comfortable you are with doing all that stuff. Okay, this is for the people that are more novice. With as much as ammo has gone up in cost, and even if cost is not an issue for you, sometimes finding it is a problem. You will be able to get a lot of very good practice and build muscle memory by doing dry practice. Okay.
Now, when you say dry practice and dry fire, are you referring to me taking my home defense revolver, taking the ammo out, and dry firing that weapon, or are you what exactly are you?
Yeah. So what I'm talking about
will that damage it? I mean, will that hurt it?
The only way I wouldn't do that is with a rimfire. Any 22 of any type, I wouldn't do that with a 22 rifle because you can damage the firing pin.
Okay.
The more modern guns, not so much as they used to, but you don't really want to dry practice with a 22. Any center fire rifle or pistol it should be no problem.
Okay.
And what I recommend that people do is make sure the weapon is unloaded, clear the gun out, and then basically keep the magazine out of the gun, and get to a distance where you're comfortable, that's practical for you in the house, and basically, if you're holding a pistol or your rifle or shotgun, whatever it is that you're doing, come from a position that you're comfortable, let's say like a low ready position or wherever you're at. If you have a pistol, you could start with the gun in your holster and basically draw the gun or point the rifle or shotgun at the target, line up your sights, and basically do everything that you would do if you had a live round in there. Just do it dry, and when the gun goes click, when the trigger clicks, reset the action of the gun. Whether it's if it's a shotgun, re-rack it. If it's an AR-15, pull the bolt back and cock the hammer and get the striker or the firing pin back into the firing position so you can do it again. So you have a trigger that's ready to go. Okay. So you could just do that over and over and over, and that's going to really help you a lot in terms of making the most out of your ammo budget and getting a lot of practice.
Should I be, playing out different scenarios? I mean, it depends
on your level of skill. That's a great question. If you are a novice shooter, you're going to have enough to do with the fundamentals, the proper grip, the proper placement of your finger on the trigger, the proper sight alignment, and all the fundamentals. I don't want to get into the fundamentals of marksmanship because it's slightly different with everything else. People can look that up online. Specifically, what we're talking about here is training at home and what you can do to maximize your training cost effectively, and how doing this stuff is important before you go out and seek advanced training, because you need to know this stuff and you need to be able to do this stuff before you go out at a firearms class. If you are not able to do this stuff safely, they will excuse you from the class. I've been in classes where people just they're not at the level of skill to be out there with other people, and they start doing stuff that's not safe. If you're going to make the commitment to go out there and buy the ammo and pay an instructor and do everything that you need to do to show up somewhere and shoot, you have to be ready to be able to make that commitment from a skill standpoint and from a safety standpoint. And if you can't do that, you're either going to hurt yourself or somebody else. And, this is not the type of thing where, it's very forgiving. So I can't overemphasize the safety aspect enough. You being able to do this stuff safely is very important. And if you show up somewhere to seek training and the instructor or instructors see that you're doing unsafe things like covering other people with the muzzle of your gun, or having your finger on the trigger at the wrong time, or basically doing unsafe stuff, not following the range commands, doing things like that, they'll warn you once or twice, but they're not going to wait for you to shoot somebody or yourself until they tell you you have to go. So, people need to be cognizant of those things, and they need to have a very strong competency in gun safety and gun handling. When you go to a range and you go to a class, after you learn the basics of marksmanship and gun safety, you're going to be learning on how to fight with a gun. And the time to do that the time to be able to do some of those things is not on the range. It's like, I wouldn't teach somebody how to load the magazine for their semi-automatic pistol, on the range when we're in class learning how to shoot the gun. There's things that you have to know, before you get there. So doing these things will really help you out.
Yeah, okay? and moving in progression, like you were saying,
exactly.
learning your firearm, and, being able to field dress it, take it apart, keep it clean, know what that means, know what the moving parts are, being able to identify, any issues, any wear and tear that you see. You need to be able to identify these items, and then the drawing and presentation of the weapon, as far as if you do find yourself in a scenario, learning how to do that properly and safely, so that you're able to defend yourself and your family.
The gun goes bang when you want it to go bang.
And not only that, but it goes where you want it to go and need it to go. And the way to be able to do that, if I understand you correctly, is to practice with the dry fire at home, then move into a range setting, getting with an instructor at that point. So we've gone through steps 1, 2, and 3, and now we reach out to an instructor, or we go to the range.
Rory, we have to be able to crawl before we can walk and run.
Yes.
That's the bottom line. Okay. And what a lot of people forget is that it's great to go to a big firearms training center where they have a shoot house and a maze and all that stuff. That's great, to be able to learn how to move tactically and how to pie corners and, how to basically do all that stuff. That's all great, okay? But the reality of the situation is, most of the time that we would be in a structure, they would be in their own home. Exactly. So you don't have to get on a plane and fly to some training center. But the truth of the matter is that the space that you occupy and call home, those are going to be the areas that you need to figure out what's going to happen, or you're going to need to learn the corners and learn how to defend yourself in that environment. That should be your priority before you go out and make a huge commitment, financial and time investment into going to one of these training centers. You should understand your house and think about where are all the places that people can be hiding. Where are places that you can be ambushed? Where are blind spots in your house? If you did have to, I'm sorry?
And in your yard.
In your yard, exactly. If you have to take a shot on your own property, what's behind you in case you miss? What happens if, you miss your shot and you end up letting go a 9mm pistol round or a 12-gauge buckshot round or a 5.56mm projectile at somebody? What if you over-penetrate the target and the bullet keeps going? Anyway, what if you shoot through your target? The bullet's going to keep going. So people need to think about all those things. And for the more advanced folks out there, you should be thinking about those things. You should be using your home as your first training center, because that is the most practical place where you're going to be. That's the most likely place where you're going to be.
Yeah,
an instructor can teach you how to pie all different kinds of corners and do stuff like that. That's great. But the instructor's not going to come to your home and say, hey, there's, a wall there that if you're coming down your stairs at 2:00 in the morning, if you're not paying attention to this spot, that's somewhere where somebody can ambush you. You need to learn the cracks and crevices and all those things in your house and on your property. And nobody's going to be able to teach you that other than yourself. So you should start looking at that regardless of what level skill you are, and make it a game. Have fun with it. If you have somebody that you're friends with, or your spouse or somebody that you can trust, help each other out. Go to have somebody come to your house. The next time, go to their house so you could change up the training environment and help each other out. Those are very practical, very effective things that you can do. Get some training, and at the same time, make it very realistic to the point where you're going to be dealing in areas which you're going to have a high likelihood of being involved in when the time comes. Okay, so those are really important things.
They are really important, and that is a lot for anybody to take in and to kind of digest. And I think that if people do follow, like I said, the ABC, the safe gun handling, drawing and presentation, working on the dry fire, getting and using your home, your immediate environment, your home and your yard. And if you live in an apartment complex, you definitely need to look at that.
Absolutely.
As far as you need to understand that, because that's a whole nother thing going on there.
Absolutely.
But if they're serious about, firearm safety and wanting to be able to defend themselves and their family, odds are they're going to be doing that in their home. And
exactly.
That's where you need to practice. That's where you need to learn that environment and to be able to do all these things that Mark has been explaining and talking about. I'm not sure. I think that if we continue it, Mark, that we're going to get into a little bit more advanced. And I think that where we're at right now is really good for the beginning.
Two other things that I want to add real quick. Okay, for the folks that get beyond that, and this is not going to be something new to this. There's a wonderful tool in the firearms world called airsoft. Basically, like an air gun that fires plastic pellets. Once you get to the point where you've done all the things that we're talking about, airsoft is a great tool. And the reason why I say that is because if you protect yourself with some goggles and the right clothing, and you follow some basic realistic safety guidelines, you can do a lot of very good force-on-force training. And you can always tell people when you're shooting with people and start moving and shooting and doing scenarios, who's done force-on-force. And you will see how much better of a fighter you get to be when you start doing that. And that's stuff that you can do with other people. Obviously, you need at least one other person to do force-on-force. But airsoft, in my opinion, is the final evolution And the other nice thing about airsoft is too, if you don't have somebody else to play with, it gives you another cheap way of training in your garage, in your basement, in a room in your house that you can use a tool like that to where you're not getting the recoil of a pistol, but you're actually getting to fire a projectile and you're getting feedback on a target. That's a great thing to do.
Okay? Yeah, and they're fairly realistic too, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, you can get set up with a let's say you have like a Glock or a Smith and Wesson M&P or fill in the blank major platform. You can buy something really nice and get yourself set up so you can start shooting right away for about $150. If you spend a little bit more, you can do even better. $150 to $200. But that's when you think about that, Rory. When 9mm ammunition for 500 rounds, you're looking at basically spending $15 a box retail and that's cheap in some places. You can buy for the cost of a case of ammo, you can be set up for airsoft, so you could be shooting for a long time. And in the end, you would probably do a lot better off than putting 500 or 1,000 rounds in a paper target. It'll bring you a lot better return. The last thing that I want to say, very important, when you're shooting from the beginning, okay, try and make yourself as ambidextrous as possible. Get used to shooting in your weak hand. As you progress in your training, how important it is to be able to shoot with your support hand. Okay,
that is an excellent point, and one that has never come up.
We're all guilty of it. Even people that do a lot of shooting, they don't practice with their support hand enough. Okay, the last thing that I want to say, when we look at engagements, when we look at the history when we look at the data provided by law enforcement agencies, when we reconstruct and deconstruct shooting incidents, a lot of them take place in low light or no light situations. And your ability to be able to use a light and use illumination to either identify your target or blind your target from shooting you is very important. That means that you're going to have to learn eventually how to shoot a gun with one hand if it's a pistol. If it's a long gun, you need to look at having a light on your gun that you can manipulate on the long gun. Having a light on a firearm, very important. You cannot shoot what you cannot see, and people will have a difficulty shooting you if they cannot see you because you have a 200 lumen light sticking in their face. Okay, so
very true.
The ability to be able to control and use light to your advantage ends up becoming a very, very important thing. It's usually dark at night, and that's when the gremlins come out. They come out at night, right?
Yes,
so
they do.
We have to think about that. It's great to be with you and using this information to make them better at being prepared. That's what we're trying to do, is focus here on providing people solutions.
To relearn the basics. I don't think that it's possible to spend too much time on the basics, and I think it's Occam's razor. The simplest answer is usually the right one, and how you keep it simple is by remaining focused on the basics, and that is gun safety, gun handling, dry firing, learning your weapon, know when, how, and where to present your weapon in various scenarios. And the only way to do that is through training and staying focused on the basics, period. So, but I appreciate your time, Mark. I think it's been a really great episode this week, and I'm looking forward to what we've got coming up over the course of the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to focus on different topics that relate to firearms. With that, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in, and you have been listening to Rory and Mark and Daily Coin, and we certainly appreciate it. Any final remarks there, Mark?
See you next time, everybody.
All right, buddy.
Take care.
Bye-bye.